which has the net effect of creating disenfranchised, destabilized, disorganized, disempowered communities of color, which at this point are being organized, motivated, and inspired by the likes of the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, and various other urban-based movements for liberation. It was an attack at the base. This was not linked directly to the economic motives of capitalism and housing. It was a counterinsurgency directed against the poor, the urban poor, and people of color in the cities, to disperse them according to the recommendations of the Kerner Commission report. It's very clear, it's stated in black and white, you read it for yourself. So what happens? City after city after city, take an area like the South Bronx where I lived in 1979. Bank disinvestment, a synergy of effects comes into play. Neighborhoods, according to the local people, why did the neighborhood go down? We're mystified. We don't see what's going on, right? But what's going on, in fact, bank disinvestment from these communities. We did a study of Citicorp Bank in 1979, 149th Street and 3rd Avenue. They issued 150 loans that year. 149 were to Westchester. This is a South Bronx bank. Small owners could no longer refinance their houses, right? Bank disinvestment. There have been studies. Roderick Wallace did a study. He was an epidemiologist. He studied areas like the South Bronx, which were experiencing this planned shrinkage. Sanitation pickups. 3 times a week, sanitation gets picked up. Suddenly they're picking up 1 time a week. Fire alarm boxes in the community taken out. Chemical warfare against the poor, crack and cocaine suddenly mysteriously appearing on streets of urban centers across the country, police looking the other way, right? Until it comes time to bust those people and consolidate it for yuppiedom, right? Various synergy of effects leading to the displacement, the mass displacement of poor people from this area. Main lesson, the displacement of people, the consequence of homelessness, the origin of homelessness linked to a conscious counterinsurgency against the poor, having to do with motives of social control, having to do with motives which move towards genocide. Why do I say that? Because to disperse a population, think of a large fist coming down on an area like Harlem, which from 1970 to 1980 lost 1/3 of its population, right? Bang, people go flying out. It's not simply enough to disperse people, they needed to be reconcentrated. This is concurrent with the criminalization of youth and the drugs in the jail industry, all right? Separate from that even, the disbursement of these people needed to be reconsolidated within control environments, i.e. the shelter system. The shelter system is organized nationally, is overseen by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which at that point, interestingly enough, in '79, was in one of their key employees was a guy by the name of Oliver North. They were running drugs all over the country, et cetera, et cetera. FEMA, the ones who facilitated the displacement and dispersal of the poor in New Orleans. They're not about trying to ameliorate the conditions of disbursement or flood. They're there to facilitate it, to grease the wheels of disbursement, to allow that to take place. So, in any case, the shelter system is brought into being as a secondary phase of this planned shrinkage, which euphemistically, Yolanda Ward, whose name should always be remembered, black 22-year-old Howard University student, Yolanda Ward, a member of the Black United Front, feminist, organizer in Washington, D.C. She and her friends within the Grassroots Unity Conference in 1979-1980 liberated a bunch of documents from HUD offices around the country, right? Some of those documents pointed to a federal program referred to as spatial deconcentration, planned shrinkage. The phrase spatial deconcentration lifted from Pentagon manuals. So now you begin to see the correlation of militarism on the home front applied to the domestic requirements of the elite vis-a-vis the disbursement and disenfranchisement and disempowerment of the urban poor. Result, hundreds of thousands, millions of poor people throughout the country, former tenants, right? Because we've come to be socialized into thinking that homeless people are some separate species, are displaced from their housing. The attack at the base to limit the ability of poor people to organize politically. You attack your house. You don't have a house, it's hard to, you don't vote, you can't organize. The generalization of this approach in terms of the foreclosure crisis as this elite domination, global domination project, the oils, the banks, and the rest of them get ready to do in other parts of the world. Foreclosure, same thing. It's a generalization of disempowerment and destabilization of masses of people who would otherwise organize. You have a house, you're stable, you can then organize in your communities for better schools, better healthcare, better so on and so forth. The genocidal aspects that these shelter systems, which were heretofore illegal, you couldn't warehouse people in barracks before. The warrant of habitability laws in a city like New York City precluded the ability to do that. You couldn't do that. Warrant of habitability laws said you had to provide people with a house. Step in the National Coalition for the Homeless. The National Coalition for the Homeless in '79, a very key year. FEMA is formed in 1979 in Washington, D.C. The National Coalition for the Homeless sues the municipality of New York City around the right to shelter. The New York State Constitution guarantees a right to a home. A home, an apple, shelter, a pear. Different thing. Their suit, which went through, right, created the legal infrastructure and the ability to create and warehouse people in barracks, which heretofore was illegal. You couldn't do that. So the shelter system is created. Poor people are warehoused in these shelter systems, low-intensity detention. Video cameras, curfews, etc., etc. Low-intensity detention. Homelessness, state repression. The consequence of state repression, counterinsurgency against the poor. The primary motive of counterinsurgency, the primary move of counterinsurgency is to move preemptively. Disperse the populations, disenfranchise them, disempower them so they can't organize. It's that kind of a move. That's what homelessness is. And you won't read that in left journals. You won't read that about in terms of the origins of homelessness. You will simply read the overbearing economistic arguments about capitalism not wanting to provide. When in fact, one example, if you're dealing from a purely economistic point of view, New York City, today, $1 billion in the homeless industrial complex in New York City. $1 billion a year, right? Half of that renovate all the abandoned spaces, of which there are enough to put homeless people in, with subsidies, with the kinds of support systems that people need, because point blank, you live on the street, you're going to start losing your bearings. You're going to start it's difficult to be sleep deprived, sleep in Penn Station and subway, month after month after month after month. They need support, right? You could take half of that money the city spends. What's the simple answer to homeless in New York? Transfer the money out of the shelter industry, renovate the abandoned housing, and you'll have money left over. You see? So if it was about a hard-headed business sense and economic point of view, we would be going that route. Why not? This system doesn't want stable communities. They don't want poor and working class people not to have to be looking over their shoulder in terms of if they're going to be able to keep their house or how they're going to afford their rent. Because if you have a stable community, you can organize to deal with this imperialist pathology that's sweeping this planet at the behest of the fucking oil companies and the bankers and all the rest of the scum, the drug dealers, right? That's what's going on here. That's what the housing question is about. In any case, in 1984, after squatting some houses in the South Bronx, and the late 70s and the early 80s, I don't need to tell you, was a very interesting time. I feel blessed to have been in that part of the world at that time. Grandmaster Flash was up the block. Zulu Nation was up the block. We were doing benefits in the local church gymnasium, raising money to renovate the building. You can imagine. The kids were just learning how to scratch. We built a park, Children's Park, 139th Street and St. Anne's Avenue, which has become immortalized in Jonathan Kozol's book, Amazing Grace. He doesn't talk about the origins of the park. It was a squat. We squatted this park. We created a children's park. That's how that park was created. The struggle in the South Bronx at that point was incredibly amazing. The coming together of artists and activists, the Young Lords, the Panthers, and the people that were in that community. 100% people of color. We squatted 2 buildings. That's where I got my start in squatting. This is 79, 80, 81, during that period. It was a beautiful time to be there. People come into the gym, you said leave your weapons at the door, and you can come in and everybody was doing their thing. In any case, by '84, I moved down to the Lower East Side. I'm from the Lower East Side. I grew up in the Jacob Riis Projects on Avenue D, and wanted to come back home. And we started squatting buildings there. The situation on the Lower East Side at that point, you're familiar with the Lower East Side, east of A, hundreds of abandoned buildings. Imagine, artists and activists and so forth, and all that abandonment going on there. Hey, it's like a painter. I'm not an artist, but it's like a blank canvas. Like, let's go, right? And people spontaneously, it wasn't like we needed to create an organization and say, well, we need to organize people to squat. People just sort of, they put two and two together. Abandoned houses, people need artist space, people need housing, people need community centers, kitchens, and so forth. Let's go. And they just went. And at our peak, we had maybe 30, 40 buildings in a kind of a network of occupation. People were taking these squats and so forth. We managed to this point, with the onslaught of yuppiedom on the Lower East Side, to maintain 11 houses. We have 11 buildings that are still there. And we're in them now, we're still there now, right? We occupy these buildings. The spontaneous nature of it was such that people from around the world were coming. So, English Steve and Kathy came from Brixton, a bunch of people came from Italy, a bunch of Berlin squatters came, and people were sharing information. There was a global squatter uprise at that point. This is in the early and into the mid 80s. And it was a beautiful thing. We took a bunch of buildings and so forth and organized them, and I don't have time now to go into the kind of the ABCs. The one thing I do want to say is that we had a dedication to the autonomous nature of each of the houses. There was no central authority. The hierarchical heads, who's your leader? Do you have a squatters executive council or some such thing, right? Like that. Always looking for the ones that they could knock off, buy off, shoot, whatever they want to do, right? Each building autonomous, so that if you and your friends lived in a house and so on, you decide everything. Who comes in, how much money you're going to put into the pot, you want to take out all those walls and make a kitchen, make a performance space, make a gallery, make whatever you wanted to do. It was you to decide. It took people a little while to get a hold and absorb the fact that they were living in freedom. It's not so easy sometimes. You're sitting around, somebody will chirp up, well, what is the city going to think of this? Wait, you are off the grid. This house and you're it. So you're there, you do this, you make the decision. So each of the houses has its own culture. Those of you who've been to C-Squad, it's kind of, punk rock heaven or whatever. I mean, toilet space, gallery space. Some of the other houses, it's, less families, whatever. Very diverse. The Lower East Side squatter community, despite what the slandering and all the rest that's gone on, 50% people of color. My building is primarily Colombian and Africans. It's a very diverse. The Lower East Side, unlike the Bronx, homogeneous population, a lot of quick consensus. Lower East Side, very diverse. Young, old, all kinds of people, all kinds of different things going on. The contribution of the artists, I can't even begin to describe the role artists play in envisioning stuff that you didn't even think was possible, imaginable, inspiring people to do what they know they can, but they need that little extra push. So it was all these people coming together. So we went through that period of time. A year and a half ago, I took a job with Picture the Homeless. Picture the Homeless is one of the rare homeless justice organizations. Most homeless organizations throughout New York City work in the area of service providers, which is, people need to eat. There's Holy Apostles Church on 29th Street. I don't know if you've ever been there. Great, good place to get a hot meal. I mean, 1,000 people a day. I don't know how many people they feed every day. Amazing place. Service providers. And then others who are, glorified poverty pimps and et cetera, in the whole homeless industrial complex, right? Picture the Homeless, rare. Homeless justice organization. Run by homeless people. People come together there and they strategize on different kinds of things to push forward and so forth. I was working with them as a housing organizer a year and a half ago, and because of my background, we were all about talking about squatting, right? What are we going to do? It's the only way we're going to get it. Department of Homeless Services is going to do anything. Bloomberg. In other words, my rap is forget about the top of the pyramid. Going to the masters and please give us housing, right? our power is at the base of the pyramid. That's where our power is, and we have some serious power at the base. Forget about making demands. Take, right? We have a slogan. You need a home, take it. Right? So we went to PTH, and you know, just to be quite honest with you, I'm sitting there, and you're sitting around with people, you know, women with kids and so forth. They're on the street. They're sleeping in Penn Station. They're out there, and I'm sitting there, and people are looking at me. You're a squatter. You know, I don't possess magical abilities to put people in the house, right? So we started, you know, kind of a stop and start, get some houses, get a few going, but just to get one house going, get people in there, you know, the work, organizing all the various aspects of it, it takes an effort. It's an effort. And unlike the period I was mentioning before, this was an attempt to organize an apparatus, a means, while I was working at PTH, to squat. It wasn't like there were hundreds of people just saying, let's take buildings. So it's a different kind of a setting. But mind you, the objective circumstances are there's thousands of vacant spaces across the city. Thousands. All kinds of places. 6-story walk-ups, foreclosed houses, empty condos, empty office buildings. Right across Charlotte's Place there. There's a freaking empty building right across the street there. You know, we should go take that one. So in any case, the germ of the idea of 040 came in my frustration of working with homeless people and, you know, wanting to do something about this human rights crisis of people and the violence that people are forced to suffer living on the streets and so forth. What can we do here? So a few of us took a few steps back and envisioned what would a citywide apparatus look like that could facilitate mass occupations of squatting and the offense, and to defend people who are facing foreclosed evictions in foreclosed housing. So it's an offense and a defense, right? What would that look like? That's what 040 is. If you, 040 is basically, we talk about the wheel. And if you go to the website and check it out, you'll see we have a big circle, and there are all these separate task areas. Because what we discovered, and just in sort of reflecting upon our experience as long-term squatters, is that there are maybe, you know, a dozen discrete functions that come into play in terms of everything from spotting a vacant house that you want to live in and fast forwarding to having a beautiful house that you're safe and securing with heat and water and electric and all the rest of it, and all the steps in there. So all those various task areas are about that. So whether it's about researching the title, the places, creating a local eviction watch campaign so that you can rapidly deploy your friends and neighbors to come and defend you, lawyers connecting to it to support the work, construction needs, an electronic organizing to organize your outreach capabilities vis-a-vis, you know, we were at bicycles, this is pre-cell phones, but the idea, so when you look at our website, you'll see these various task areas. So what the idea is that we are public. 040 is a public pro-squatter organization that is seeking volunteers, many of whom may have homes, but who want to contribute to the human rights struggle for a home, you see? And they can sign up to these various areas and work as part of this wheel, see? And when all those aspects of this wheel are functioning and working together, we can occupy spaces, renovate those spaces, defend those spaces, and create homes, community centers, and other kinds of venues for people. So that's really the purpose and the function and the vision of organizing for occupation. So I invite you to check out that website and so forth. The last piece is that I handed out that intake form, and for those of you who are interested in squatting, who are interested in participating in this approach to creating housing and or other, fill those out, leave us your contact information, and what we're doing now is, along with other kinds of outreach intake lists and forms that we've gotten through Picture the Homeless, through Occupy Wall Street, and other means, begin to coalesce groups, right, and have orientation, and begin to talk to one another more specifically about how we're going to go about securing a house for that particular group. getting people's sensibilities. Yeah, you know, I'm from Queens. I like the idea of Queens. How, you know, what do you got in Queens? You know, that kind of stuff. So we start getting people together. The research committee, you know, we've got addresses and so forth. We're checking that out. The methodology is for crack teams to go in, check them all out, check structure and so forth. So by the time your group is assembled, we already have some ideas. So it's here, well, here are the keys. You go in there, and we got to organize accordingly these other functions. Because as I said, it was a synergy of effects that displaced these neighborhoods. It's a synergy of effects that comes together to keep you in those houses. There's a thin legal defense in New York City called the 30-day law, right? If you can show that you've been in a space for 30 days or more through the receipt of mail, right, you are not considered a trespasser. So our approach, now this is separate from the public occupations and so forth, which we're all familiar with down here at Wall Street, I mean OWS and so forth, the public stuff. I'm not talking about that right at this point. I'm talking about clandestine occupation for housing for the long run, okay? The first month or two, clandestinity is the law, right? You're getting mail, you're coming in, you're securing from the inside. You can have work days and clean up the debris and all that, but basically you're getting mail, right? And we can go into the particulars of how that's accomplished and so forth. You want to basically put yourself in a position that if somebody spots you in there and the local foot soldier comes over and says, well, what are you guys doing here? And so on, well, we live here, here's our mail. You see, police regulations stipulate it's an either or. You're either a trespasser or you're a resident. If you can show that you've been receiving mail there and so forth, ideally you get Con Ed to come in and install you get a meter and give you a public hall account. You show them your bill. They kick it to the owner. See, it's the owner that then it's the onus on the owner, alleged owner, to come in through due process to evict you. 9 times out of 10, they're not so interested in that because, well, I want to go to trial. And I want to bring 500 of my friends there. We're going to politicize this issue about these vacant spaces, the crisis of homelessness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, like that. You see? And now, unlike the 80s, then we're going to open up for discussion. Unlike the 80s, most of these houses were city-owned. Because this process I was talking in terms of the history, HPD was set up again, that same period, late 70s, early 80s, to take all these abandoned houses that up to that point were small owners, right? HPD was set up as the giant vacuum to take all those small owner properties and over a course of a couple of decades broker them to the wealthy. Massive transfer of wealth from small owners to the wealthy through HPD, the city coming in and through court proceedings taking all this housing. We were squatting a lot of HPD buildings. Today, different story. They've divested them, so mostly banks, right? Great target. All these houses owned by banks. So banks are affiliated all these bullshit related agencies, you know, they're stealing people's homes and so on. To me, somebody asked me, is it easier now? I think they're a softer target than HPD. I think that you know, I'm very optimistic about the ability of mass occupations and so forth done in the correct way, right? Where you at least accord yourself that 30-day defense, as thin as it is, but it will hold up in that immediate confrontation with the cops, right? That we are in a better position now, given the zeitgeist and the subjective factors of people really, you know, they've had it up to here with this fucking rampant greed and bullshit, and they're ready to say, yeah, let's take back our land, let's take back our houses, and the banks are softer targets, it seems to me, than HPD, which is affiliated with the NYPD and the mayor. They're more consolidated. The banks are discreet. We can put people in front of the banks. There's different kinds of things we can do to hold that housing. So I say, by all means, we need to squat, and squat some more. All right? And thank you all very much. So now in the next half hour, we can do some Q&A, and we have someone who's going to facilitate this.
My question would be, is with property owned by the city versus, with property owned by the city versus property owned by banks or a private owner, like, does the 30-day rule apply, or are there other laws that make it more difficult to squat in property owned by the city?
No, to my understanding, according to our legal people, the 30-day law applies. The 30-day law is one of these things where it's a basic kind of foundational differentiation between a trespasser and a resident. So that if you're in a foreclosed house and so forth, and you're receiving mail there from the point of view of the local precinct, right, that happens to find you there, they don't know anything other than whether or not you're a trespasser. So if you can show that you've been receiving mail there, what are they going to do? You see, so yes, it would still apply. 30-day law. You know, if you've ever been in an unfortunate situation of having a roommate who you were friends with and was getting mail there, and then you decided you wanted to have your place back, and they said, well, you can't kick me out because I'm getting mail here, right? That 30-day law, that's what that's all about, you know. So the receipt of mail and being able to certify that you've been receiving mail in the space puts you a few steps, you know, you're no longer considered a suspect. And that would be true of any of these situations.
Tim?
All right, we're very serious about doing this. I'm willing to get started tomorrow. I would like some information on how to actually just do it. You know, not just talk about it.
Did you fill out one of these forms?
Filled out the thing, and like I said, as soon as possible. Like
Yeah.
I said, I'm willing to start tomorrow, and he's willing to start with me too.
Yeah.
I got stamps. I'll have her send postcards to each other. You know? If that's what it takes
We
to
can
get
probably
mail.
set up an intake office in our building here that we have right next door on 50 Broadway. So we'll keep in touch online. No, maybe not.
I would not.
I'll find out
Don't
through
promise
outreach
that.
what to do.
One of the things that you can do, we will process this information very quickly and start to get in touch with people and get groups together as we get, you know, sites that look viable.
How many people would we want to get into one building?
Well, it depends. You know, you imagine a foreclosed house, a two-family, whatever, you're talking maybe 4, 5, 6 people like that. If it's a 6-story walk-up with 15 apartments
Like
in it,
the place
then
across
judge
from
accordingly.
Charlie's place, for example.
But generally speaking, you know, you don't really want to start with any larger of a group than 6 to 8 people, mostly because you want to maintain a certain, you know, level of security,
Sure.
and you don't want to tip your hand and so on and so forth. And I said, the chances of success over the long term are dependent on your ability to maintain a level of secrecy in the first month or so. You see, so you want people who you know and trust and so forth. So go in with a smaller group. You can always build it later. Trust me. You get a site that's viable and you've been there and you've weathered that first hurdle, everybody who knows you is going to be coming to you looking for a place.
Okay, Jordan?
Cool. I have 2 real quick questions. One is all the specifics, like the kinds of mail you need to receive and where to do research for all this stuff. Can I find those specifics on how to do that stuff on your website? Or is-
The particulars of this approach are being put together in a manual.
Awesome.
And if you give us, 3, 4, 5 more days, we'll have it published.
Cool.
It'll be downloadable on the website, because what we want to do is we want to empower people throughout the city to engage, you know, to arm them with the information they need to facilitate. We need wildcat squatter movement all around town. We need to create an untenable situation for the banks and the city and so forth, so they say, we want to meet with you, you see, because that's where it's going to go. And then, you know, individual houses and you know, because we never think in terms of centralized, we'll have one arrangement, but, you know, this manual with the particulars, you know, with the mailman, you can meet them on the corner. If you have a box, they can put it in there. You could set up an account in the local post office. But, you know, there's different approaches. The city has tried to label vacant spaces now because they're trying to squatter-proof houses in a lot of different ways to create dead mailboxes. So the mailman would come and say, well, yeah, I used to deliver, but now they're saying this is a dead address. See, but in any case, that's all going to be delineated in this manual. So give us about a week or so, and the 040 site, you can download that manual.
Great.
Andy?
I wanted to talk about like perceived or real gentrification that like might occur if a lot of people from OWS start entering neighborhoods that for one we aren't necessarily have been a part of in the past, and how to like balance this like amazing concept with the kind of like, you know, like personally, like I live in a tent, or sometimes I live in a tent, and sometimes I live in a couch. So like the idea of like taking a house like somewhere sounds like the fucking awesomest thing ever. But like I think it also kind of betrays a lot of the reasons why I came here in the first place, which is not to like get us in the place to stay.
Well, I totally understand what you're saying, and I think it's up to people's individual choice in terms of how they see their political practice and their needs and so on and so forth. Because I'm not trying to create a bias against any forms of occupation, because we're not talking about public space occupation this time. Although I know in the Wing there are public space occupations being discussed, and so forth, and we need that as well. In terms of your other question, though, which is about the whole question of not being perceived as invaders in a particular neighborhood and that kind of thing. Part of the reason that we want to create kind of orientation sessions with people is that we will be drawing from other lists and other communities. We want to try to create groups that can have a kind of mutual support and understanding among each other to cover that, and also too that in our process as part of 040, we look at houses, and looking at those houses is also concurrently organizing locally, because the eviction watch capability to defend is also about community organizing in the community, and by implication drawing in local people who are also looking to squat. Putting that in another way, I'm always telling people it's always good if you want to move on a house, don't be precluded by saying, well, we shouldn't go into this house because it's in a neighborhood and we're strangers here and so forth. No, go out and get to know the people in the neighborhood, talk to people in the neighborhood, find out who are those people who need a house and so on, bring them in. You meet the local matriarch of the community and so forth, you go to the churches and talk to people and so forth. It is the morally correct thing to do, but it's also tactically very useful to bring in people from the community. So having that kind of consciousness is definitely the first step. But in terms of 040, we will assemble groups that try to enact that kind of thinking and so forth. So, but to the best of our ability, but if you and your friends, because I never want to suggest that you got to go somewhere to tell you how to do it. You know what I mean? It ain't rocket science. There's different kinds of things you can learn from 040, from the manual and so forth. You go into a house, you're talking to the local people. You want to bond with local people and bring them in, because that will ensure that if something untoward occurs at your front door in terms of some pseudo authority, the local folks are going to come out and say, "Get your hands off these people," because one of our neighbors is in there. That kind of thing. So you just have to think that way, and I think then we're not going to have a problem with that.
So it's 5:17. We close stack. We have 3 more people. Madeline is first. Frank is leaving at 5:30.
Okay, I don't know if this is the place to start talking specific neighborhoods, but an idea that's dear to my mind is St. George and Staten Island, which is very close to the ferry, which is very close to, it's less than a mile away. There's in and among an long-standing intentional community, there are foreclosed, abandoned homes that the owners have refused reasonable market rate offers from people in that community to buy these homes. It's like there's justice all around, and I think people in that community, from my talking to them, they've said we would love other autonomous communities to be in and among in this area. So I'm just bringing that area up. I was walking around, I saw these scenery.
Okay, I would just suggest off the bat that you create some kind of meeting out there. Are you familiar with the people out there, or some potential? Yeah, if you could somehow create a way in which we can bring some 040 people out there, and we'll get the ball rolling out there. Because part of what we're doing is to try to create local 040 style pluses. We can do a training, we can put the manual in people's hands, and we can offer support in terms of eviction watch capability. But really, bottom line is that where you are is where the power is. So you want to create, in concentric circles, you want to build support locally. But to initiate that process, of people who have an interest in that, please set up some kind of meeting out there, call us out there, and we'll get that ball rolling and get it going. Bed-Stuy has its own eviction watch, 040 style organism going out there. It's not about centralizing. None of us wants to be the organization. We consider ourselves organization as a verb. We're not a noun. You know, we're basically just trying to facilitate a process and inspire people and offer expertise, or it's based on experience, not on innate intelligence, just on this has been our experience. But yeah, set that up and we'll come out there and get something going.
Jesse?
Occasionally singing in the courtroom. I just want to make a quick direct response. We're going to occupy Wall Street Honors in St. George this Saturday from 12 to 4. So please, join us.
Oh, there you go.
And I'll be saying a few things about our lovely mafioso legal system on stuff.
Great, he's quite a poet. Jesse?
I'm from Oregon, and I have been living in a homeless community on a farm that is not upkept, and we're all being forcefully evicted. And I'm wondering what kind of rights do you have in a forest-like setting where people are just...
You're asking me, a born and bred New York, Manhattan, Lower East Side, I haven't been out of the freaking neighborhood in like 4 decades. What's going on in a farm? I don't know. To me, I think it's the same principles apply. You got to deal horizontally with your community, and you have to have people who are willing to put their bodies on the line to defend it. In other words, non-violently, but bring bodies to bear, bring people there, isolate who the owner is, the target, and put political pressure on the owner, and bring in the media and message your situation in such a way that people find it appealing, and this is the reason we're here, and we believe in this, and so forth and so on, and do the best you can. I mean, we can learn our eviction watch here, but I don't know if a lot of people can make it over to where you are. There is Reclaim. Are you familiar with Reclaim? Well, you should contact Reclaim. I think that's Thaddeus. You know who this is? There's Reclaim in Oregon.
Reclaim it.
No, Reclaim in Portland. Yeah, they've been working on doing squatting and defending people in foreclosed houses and so forth. So if you can check them out, that might be, they may offer some support.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Does it have to be an entire abandoned building, or could it be a particular unit of the building? Or I'm thinking more in terms of storefronts and maybe
Like warehouse department.
Or like older small theaters around downtown that have been, they can't afford the rent increases, so they leave and nothing's there now.
Yeah, listen, I mean, the squattable venues are myriad. It could be an abandoned theater, it can be a 6-story walk-up, it can be an empty condo, it can be a warehouse department in a public housing project, or in a 6-story walk-up, and half the building's empty because they're trying to consolidate it, gentrify it, and make a condo, and so forth. All of these are viable and potential and desirable spaces for occupation. If you're in a warehousing situation, for instance, and the building's half empty, and the tenants really understand that the owner is emptying out these apartments in order to turn it into a condo, then it's in their defense to bring people into those apartments. So it's very easy to organize those people around that, including the super. Look, hey, they're going to come gentrify this thing. You guys are all out of here. So let's get into those apartments and defend them. Same thing with the empty theaters and so forth. A lot of that, again, depends on organizing horizontally in the community and messaging what you're doing in a way that says, this theater has been abandoned for so many years, we're representing this group, maybe to connect with some of the local arts groups in the community that have been interested in it. This is true of public abandoned schools in various communities, hospitals, and so forth. We need to create a dialogue. We need to create situations. You've heard of the Situationists in France, right? 68. Create new situations. Nothing's happening with this theater, nothing to do. Well, create a situation. Go in there, bring some people in, start messaging it, and all of a sudden, this theater mogul, this one's going to come in, they're going to back it up, they're going to say, yeah, let's do this and let's do this. You're not going to create situations until you make a move. So, by all means, all these places are viable venues for squatting and occupation and for, for holding. But it comes down to organizing horizontally and organizing for strength in the communities that you're working in. And then, with the technological capabilities we have now, to reach out to people and create that rapid deployment capability. Because if we can bring people to the site of potential eviction, you know, one marshal, I don't know if to sound overly militant or adventuristic or whatever, but it's like, hey, you're gonna have to do better than that. You know, like don't give me a marshal. We're not going for that. You know, we got 300 people here in the house, and we got 300 more outside the house. So, in other words, you're gonna spend money. We wore them down in the Lower East Side in part because it was a war of attrition. You know, they evicted us at 319 East 8th Street in 1989, right? There was eight of us living in this building. Small building. It was my house. I watched the front of the facade come down at midnight. They were doing the ball. My front wall came down. My entire house is there. Spotlights, smash. I watched it all go down. Right? I lost everything. You know, there were hundreds of people surrounded, police, riot cops, the whole shit. Right? Next day, City Evict squatted it up. $1.2 million to evict these people. Then the contradictions started to come up. Why are they spending all this money? Started to wear them down. The more spaces we can take, the more pressure we can put on the banks and so forth, who are the primary holders of these places right now. With their reputation and our numbers, we can freaking take back the city just through direct action on the street.
We see a show of hands on that.
And that's the way we should go. I'm not saying that the political struggles, the witnessing on the streets of these public spaces, providing venues for the expression of dissent and so forth, are not as important or less important. I'm not saying that at all. But I think we have a real opportunity now, given the zeitgeist, given the frustration and the anger and rage that the working class and middle classes are feeling in terms of the foreclosure crisis, to move back into these houses. I was a couple of days ago out in Jamaica, Queens, meeting with a middle-aged black lady with her kid, who'd been forced out of her house, an apartment building that was foreclosed on. She was up to date in her rent, but the whole building was foreclosed on. She was evicted. She said, well, I grow up in this neighborhood. She knows people. She's saying hello to people on the street. She said, I've been liking that house there for years. I've been looking at it. So she coaxed me into climbing into the damn thing. I'm just standing across the street. I go in the side base and I look around. Hey, it looks pretty good. Come back out and I tell her about it. And I said, well, we have 040. We'll do what we can to support you in this. We have an approach and so on. She called me the next morning and said, I want to thank you for coming out, but I don't think I'm going to need you guys now because I got my church. I got my people. We're ready to go. She just needed somebody to break the ice and so on. That's what we got to do, is we got to get people, the main thing, and I talked about this at another point, occupy the mind. We have to, we have to dislodge the impediments we have in our head to like self-determination, taking it back. You go in, so worst case scenario, what? Get the hell out of here, kid. I mean, that's it. Maybe you get a trespass ticket, but they don't like to do that because they don't want you to go to court. And now, at this point, they're not going to rendition us to Romania. You know what I mean? That doesn't look like it's going to happen yet. They haven't criminalized squatting to the point of creating some sort of dastardly, type offense. We're not there yet. Let's move. Let's move and organize and take these houses back. And the positive side of it is that when people move into these spaces and you create free zones, you unleash the creative capabilities of people. You've seen this at Occupy Wall Street, right? I know there are contradictions. I know that the city is trying to fan these contradictions by sending people from all over the city there to create an untenable situation. We had hundreds of people living in Tompkins Square Park in the late 80s. People were coming in with their bag. Oh, I was living in Bryant Park for the last 5 years, but they said they can't stay there anymore, but they sent me here. They will do that. They'll send infiltrators in there. They'll send all kinds of people who will create violent situations, create contradictions, try to divide people, divide communities, divide cultures. So we can't let that happen. You see, we have to be stronger than that. But it's a challenge. I understand that. But by occupying spaces, we can create the ability to move people into real housing and to create situations and unleash people's creative abilities so they can work these homes, create alternatives for themselves in terms of their lives. They're not wage slaves because they don't have to pay these ridiculous rents and so forth. They have time to exercise do their art, go back to school, organize 24/7, do what they want to do. That's the idea. The idea of squatting in the end, for me, all right, this is my perspective, is that yes, everybody needs a home. Everybody has to have a place. Yes, we need community centers, we need public spaces. The suppression of public space is synonymous with the suppression of dissent. That's why they're trying to attack these public spaces. they attacked our band shell at Tompkins Square Park. They put a curfew on the park. Why? Because that was our living room. We were organizing out of that park 24/7. Imagine a band shell with electricity where bands could come in at 3 in the morning and plug in and play. Forget it. We were like, that was our organizing center. They're attacking those public spaces. But we need to create ways in which we can extend the terrain of dissent. That we can create zones where people can actualize their creative capabilities and so forth, and create homes and so forth. But beyond that, we need to create communities of resistance in these neighborhoods. We take whole swaths of buildings and houses and so forth, so on. Yeah, I've got a house, and we talked about this in the squatter scene on the Lower East Side. I got my own, I got my door, all right, I'm done. No, you're not done, right? The reason, and this sounds a bit harsh, but for me, the reason started off a counterinsurgency against the poor, right? We need to deal with that. So what we're talking about is creating homes for people, creating stability so that we can fight for the revolutionary changes in this country. We need to create a base of operations that we're not content with limiting ourselves, that we've got ours now. We have our theater, we have our house, and so forth. No, we need to create communities of resistance, deal with the genocide that's happening against poor people, deal with the imperialism that's taking place, the Pentagon's sort of rip off of the wealth of this country and so forth, the situation that this globe is in terms of ecological contradictions and so on and so forth, all the rest of that stuff. A house as a base to organize. You see? Yes. So we need a house to live in, but we need a base in which we can fight as a community. We need to create communities of resistance.
Yeah. Yes. 5:30.
I want to thank you all very much. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I apologize for not being able to stay longer. If you like us, we passed the flyer. We're having a benefit next week out in Brooklyn. Takeover. We're going to show a couple of squatter films and so on. Excuse me. And those of you who filled out the forms will all be in touch. And please check out our website. And if you can also contact us through the website. So if you have ideas and so forth and so on, but we will be contacting you in terms of forming, these affinity groups, and we'll target particular addresses and we'll get moving. Okay? All right. All power to the people. All power to the imagination.